my friend John Beede. And John Beede is probably like the coolest dude on the planet. Actually, you are one of the most interesting people I know, John, and one of the best guys. And I really do mean that, because you just came out with a book, The Warrior Challenge: 8 Quests for Boys to Grow Up with Kindness, Courage, and Grit. And this book got picked up by Penguin Random House, which is a big deal. Okay. Like, lots of my clients want to write a book that lands a traditional deal. And we're not even talking platform right now. We're really talking about the kind of book that a publishing house like that would be really interested in. So before we even talk about the book, and before we talk about the fact that you are a youth speaker, that you've been a youth speaker for over a decade.
Well over
a decade, right? You were the kind of guy who could write here are the 7 lessons I learned from climbing mountains, right? Like, you have an amazing, I don't know, like CV of adventures. It's the 7 summits, climbing the tallest mountain on every of the continents. You've, like, on those expeditions, you've had
7 countries, kite surfed every major ocean, been attacked by wild animals, been in tribal warfare. Yeah, I've done some stuff.
Kidnapped. You got kidnapped in Papua New Guinea. Okay, like, we were in Papua New Guinea and we were looking around, and I'm like, I get what happened. I get what happened. Like, it was a scary place, right?
Yeah.
So you, like, along your road, and you use this material in your speeches. You use your mountain climbing expeditions and all that experience to speak to young people about creating their own Everest, to climb their own mountain, find their own big goal. At least, those were the old speaker reels that I would see from you. So the big question is, why did you not create the 7 lessons I learned from Everest book when most people would go that route? Why not?
So you're my friend. We met in Denali back in 2008 or 9, I think it was. And half of what we'll talk about now is just to you as my friend. The other half is going to be for those listening who are going to be helped by this. And so I'll start this with, like, Anne is my friend. I called you after climbing Everest, and I told you about encountering, there were 9 who passed away that season. And there was one man I was up close and personal with. His name was Muhammad. I found out later, and I didn't know him, but I came across him on his last breath. After Everest, I was in South Africa, and I called you, and I said, I don't know what's going on, but, like, I was talking to you and Walt. I'm beside myself. I can't figure out what's going on with me. And you suggested, the 2 of you, that it could be post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's this form of therapy called EMDR, and even if it's not, it's worth going through because it's not going to hurt, right? Well, it turns out you were spot on, right? It was post-traumatic stress disorder. I spent 3 years in pretty dedicated therapy sessions because I went back even further, and I realized I'd been around 16 deaths that I never stopped and took the time to figure out. So once I got, like, a lot of people don't know, PTSD can be healed, not just like helped, but healed. And once the exact same week that the therapist said, you're good, man. Like, you don't need to keep coming. I promise. Like, I love hanging out with you, but you don't have any of the symptoms any longer, unless you're lying to me. And I was like, no, I'm not. That was the same week that I got a call from my manager saying there's this opportunity to write a book for young men about what it really means to be successful. And the idea was that the editor had already had this concept that she was really interested in writing, or having a book created about. She just needed to find the right writer for it. And so my manager, who had already worked with me in creating some of these promo videos that you mentioned, who had already seen me self-publish 2 books, says, I think there's, like, the right alignment of this guy who has redefined what success is for himself. Because for me, it was like, I'm going to conquer every mountain, and I'm going to like prove to the world my mountain manliness and go be such a stud that everybody's going to think I'm awesome. Well, then I was broken down. And I saw in my research and considering making a proposal for this book, and we can talk about the proposal process in a bit, that I wasn't alone. Men across all around the world aren't getting a clear path or a model of what it means to be a healthy, integrated guy in today's society. And that's why we saw the need for the Me Too movement. That's why we have Peter Pans on one end of the toxic masculinity spectrum, and on the other we have aggro males. And I've been a part of both of those two categories. And through this therapeutic work, I was like, the most important thing I could do with my story and myself would be to make a stab, if you will, at making a better path.
Yeah, I started going through, like I love the look inside feature in Amazon because you can like really dive in. And first of all, like I should pause. Like Walt and I were running down the road and I said, "Did you see John's book? Oh my God, he has a book and it's for,
on your morning runs?
Morning run." And I said, and it's for boys. And he goes, "Well, like what 12-year-old boy reads books?" First of all, I called total bullshit on him because he at 12 read a book like, I can't even remember, -480, degrees about climbing Denali in the winter. And we know how crazy it is to climb it
Yeah.
in the winter, right? And that's what it started him on his path. So his first thing was, what boy buys books and reads it, right? But I love
they don't buy it,
mom
but
buys.
Mom and dad buy it, and so we can, like, that's the market. That's who I want to purchase the thing. The reader is the young man, and I guarantee you that parents, or at least quality parents, in my judgmental opinion, have their kids reading books. And I have so many friends who say my kids are avid readers, so I think that's BS.
Like,
And it's proven in Walt's own BS. Like, he read books.
like we were talking about the Hardy Boys and all the series.
Yeah.
And, like for guys your age, it's the choose your own adventure books were like huge in your
Mm-hmm.
era. So like, first of all, that's totally wrong. But a lot of people aren't paying attention to who is purchasing the book and why they
Yeah.
purchase the book, and the market really. I mean, for traditional books, mostly it's women who are buying books, and it's also men, buying nonfiction. So you aimed for, or the publishing house, in conjunction with you, aimed at the moms who want to, and the dads who want to help their son navigate this really crazy world. Because if you have sons, the Me Too movement is really scary. Like you say, our society is needed to change. But now how do we teach our guys how to navigate this and be in the world?
Yes.
I think that layer, that outcome, that big outcome, like how do you navigate as a boy in this world and still be a manly man,
Yes.
still be a really integral part of society, right? So Jordan Peterson came out with the 12, I don't even remember the 12
Rules for life. Yeah.
rules for life. I personally love that book, and my son had read it, and I thought, what a great mentor. My kid's dad died. And I
Sure.
thought,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a really good mentor. Like, how do you become a man in this society? A lot of women hate that book. A lot of women wouldn't want their sons to read that book. It's just like,
I've had a lot of people say they hate this just off the title. I had a radio host who said, I won't even pronounce the subtitle because I don't believe that there should be boys or girls. Like, people will just hate your stuff just without even thinking about what's in it. Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
no, I love that. So in the conversation relative to Jordan Peterson, a lot of people know he's like, I love him. You either love him or you hate him.
Mm-hmm.
So where does the conversation flow? I mean, was that a book that came up when you were discussing this with, how to position this book in the market?
So it's not like I'm the boys' version of Jordan Peterson, that's for sure. However, I love the fact that he takes a position and he not only has thought it well through to where he can defend it, but he believes that there's nothing wrong about being a male. That's beautiful. And with him and many others that I could name, and I'm sure you'd recognize all the names, I thought, if all this is true, and they're all saying that there's nothing wrong with being a male and there's a great version of being a guy, what is that? And I looked everywhere trying to find, where's the book that has this? Where are the resources it has? Here's how to actually, like, for young men to be that person. And it doesn't exist. We used to have rite of passages as societies for both men and women. They would be split. You know, guys go this way, girls go do this thing. That's what makes you a human who can look after yourself and defend your tribe. We lost that because there's no reason for you and I to know how to fend off a lion right now. There's no reason for us to jump from trees with vines tied around our legs, or to like put our hands into bullet ant gloves and be stung, because those threats don't exist to us. But because we have different threats, we need a rite of passage that shows our young people how to look after themselves and defend their tribes today. And that's what I set out to create in this book.
So you chose, I mean, you're there, right? You're the narrator. You're curating the stories, and you don't just borrow from your own life. Like you're
No.
in there. But I would say, like, you're in there like a side salad. You're not
Mm-hmm.
meat and potatoes on that book.
So you
And
know how Walt read that book about climbing Denali at night, and that was what inspired him? I had that same thought that, hey, for me, climbing, like these climbing stories are what inspired my life when I was a kid, but not every kid's going to be drawn to that. So I took 8 real life historical, some living today, some have passed away, but historical superheroes, and I write in the second person. So when you like emailed me earlier, you were like, oh, it's a parable story because there's this kid in Africa. No, 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 no. This is the story of a real human being who was being trained in a Maasai warrior camp, and I put the reader in their shoes. We go to Ernest Shackleton. You're in his shoes, eating penguins and seeing your ship sink. Uh, you're jumping over the Great Wall of China and learning self-awareness. You're Baja off-road racing in Mexico, learning how to set values. You're escaping from a communist country, learning how to set boundaries for yourself. You're in these real-life superheroes moments because different stories are going to appeal to different kids. So I wanted to give them 8 role models that they could live up to. And I do inject myself as sort of the decompressing, like, okay, let's talk about this team. What just happened to you? Story. And actually, that's kind of like cool with the way the book was created, because it was a total shift. It was originally intended to be fiction, where it was like this dystopian virtual reality world, where they would like go into these mods of these guys, and then there would be a fictional coach who would talk them through it, and the publisher was like, no, 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 we need more like actual self-help. So then I just cut out that trope and made it, you're in the story, and then John's talking to you as the coach.
because your one book, your first book, or the one that shows up on Amazon, it was Climb On and Success Strategies for Teens, which makes a lot of sense based on that's your talk. And
Yeah,
you created a parable. That's like a
like
full-blown parable.
that one's full-blown parable, right?
Full-blown parable, and the hero was female, was a young
Mm-hmm.
girl. So
Correct.
like, you're like, whoever says why are you writing for boys? What about girls? You speak to that topic, which I thought was really good in your new.
Well, can I answer that directly? I write to guys because guys have a different societal message about what it is to be a good human being than women do. Because there's a different ailment, there needs to be a different medicine given. I would love to write, to co-author 8 Quests for Girls to Grow Up with Kindness, Courage, and Grit, and I would be beyond thrilled if I didn't have to gender split the books, or because it's applicable to every gender, all genders. If it could just be 8 Quests for Kids to Grow Up with Kindness, Courage, and Grit, the books wouldn't even be needed, because then we would all get, hey, we're all just human beings, we're all equal, and it doesn't matter what parts you're born with or what chromosomes you have, you just got to be a good person. But because I'm coming from a different starting place and guys get these different messages, I struggled with this, but I realized there had to be a dedicated message for guys.
I think you did an awesome job, and I agree with you that we got to be speaking specifically to guys right now. It's a really tough landscape to navigate.
There's
So
really beautiful movements for women, like go on women's retreats and here are your natural strengths. How do you harness those and use those for success in the world? And that's beautiful, and I encourage that, and I love that. I think young guys especially are feeling a little bit left behind. Like, what about us? And for a guy my age, that makes sense. There should be these like these women's retreats and things that women strive towards. Yes, because well, like my generation is a part of the problem. Yet young men, they didn't have anything to do with like creating the problem. They're just kind of going, okay, I guess we're just worthless here. Like that's really an attitude that a lot of young men have
I'm
today.
seeing great stuff crop up for men on like how to own your emotions and how to have like
Mm,
really tight guy friends and how to be vulnerable around, like it's tough for guys, I think, like your age and up, where you're not supposed to be vulnerable. You're supposed to be the guy who summits like, oh yeah, my legs are bleeding. Oh, I don't have legs anymore. I will climb on my stumps. And you like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You are expected to just be able to bear all the pain
I get people coming up after my speeches all the time, like, "Did you see dead bodies? Tell me about that. What was it like to like stomp right past them on your way to the summit as you conquered?" Like that's well,
well,
first, like, thanks for like rubbing that
I
in.
was in therapy for quite some time. Thank you for asking. Thank you for
but
asking.
but they want to hear like, show me that nothing affects you, and that's the model of masculinity that I also had, and that had to be redefined. I personally don't see or feel or have researched that women have that same, girls get that same messaging. So that's why the book exists for guys.
So like I loved taking a look at how you published your first book, and lots of the people that I work with, that I encourage them, let's go with an independent press.
Yeah,
Let's do a partnership press because we can control everything. We can sell things off the back of it. We can use it the way we want to use it. And the way you put your book together was like, you were getting speaking gigs, you were getting bulk
mm,
sales. I could see the setup. I'm like, well done. I'm going to model that for people. So it served a purpose. I mean, that one book came out in 2005. So when you go with a traditional publishing house, you're going to get a very different effect. You're going to use it for your business in a different way, I think. How will going with a traditional publishing house like a Penguin Random with a lot of credibility and a lot of, like, wow, you made the big leagues.
right.
How do you envision that serving your career right now?
Yeah, great question. And with Climb On, you're right. It was my business card. I wanted to be a speaker, and I knew that, well, in order to be a credible speaker, I should have a book. So I spent a summer, sat down, wrote the book, hired with my own, well, not even my own money, with credit cards. I hired a graphic designer, I hired a typesetter, hired an editor, sent it and printed off 3,000 copies, had them sitting in my room of my shared house, like in we all sublet a different room, and there's a stack of 3,000 books sitting there. I'm going, how am I ever going to sell these things? And then it was motivation for, oh, I guess I have to book these speeches, otherwise I'm going to be like having these books sitting here for the rest of my life. It worked. It was a do or die. I have to pay off this credit card debt. I have to make these speeches work. I have to move these books. Fast forward to the second part of your question. This one is much different because whereas I made, with Climb On, it retailed for $15. If I sold it at a speech for 10, which was my deal, I would make $7.33 because of my own printing costs. This, I make like, I think it's between $1.20 and $2 depending on which medium it's sold on and which format it gets sold through.
Yeah.
Ebook, audiobook, or hardcover. It was the right choice. and the best decision to use the publisher because one, they had rigorous editing processes that were well beyond anything I ever could have imagined. Two, the graphic design and the comic book art that they put in there and their ability to create a beautiful piece was beyond anything I found on Fiverr, anything I've ever found on 99 Designs or Elance. I mean, it was just above and beyond super high quality. So for a message so important, I wanted it wrapped up in the best possible package. But even bigger, I wanted to expand my speaking income and my speaking reach. This is just from the business perspective, put
Yes.
aside like the point of the book. But I wanted more dollars to come through from speaking, because when I looked at my career income over the 14 years since writing Climb On, 90% of it came from speaking income. 10% of it came from products that included Climb On, not just the book itself, but like all the rest was product. So I'm going, okay, well, why, if it's that small of a percentage, why don't I just like use the thing for what it was originally intended for, lose the profit, but make the speaking side of it and the credibility side of it blow up on the other end?
Will it change what you speak about?
Mm. My life will have, like what I shared about climbing on Everest and being taken kind of like kidnapped or hostage, really just pinned down is what it was. We weren't really kidnapped. We were just like stuck. All those experiences will change what I speak about. I did teach goal setting, get to the top, make it like your dedicated effort. And that's fully true and valid. But now I don't think it's about conquering. In climbing all these mountains, it's never been, I realize now, about going and like destroying a mountain. You can't do that. That's just a dumb idea. You can experience what the mountain has to teach to you and feel blessed if you get to the top and honor those teammates who you're with and get down safely. And that's what I now will try and theme through my talks is it's not about stomping your ice axe into a snowy rocky peak in the middle of the Himalayan sky, because that doesn't matter to anybody. But what matters is who you are to the people you're with in that moment on your team, as I've seen with you on Aconcagua and while climbing in Alaska.
I know, we had fun, didn't we?
Yeah.
It does change you, and it's, you know, it's like it's about the process. It's
Yes.
seriously who you become. It's not about standing up on a summit. Like if you're up there, whatever, or you're like 2,000 feet below, whatever. It's like that process of who you become and the choices that you make.
Mm.
You know, they're the things that change who you are as a human being. So, you know, like everybody wants to get to the top, everybody wants the result, everybody, and like they're like everyone wants to skip process. And that's why I kind of wanted to really walk through your thought processes, your choices, you know, what you were weighing, how the deal came about. Like I love, and I hear it more and more, that there are people who are reading Quora or following Quora or following, you know, influencers on Instagram, and they're seeing what's trending, and they're like, this is going to be a hot topic. Let's find someone who can write.
Yeah.
I've like had a number of clients who come saying they're asking me to write this because they think I'm the right person. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Was it hard to curate out a lot of your stories in favor of other people's stories, or in favor of being the overarching narrator? Was that hard? Because you've got so many things to choose from.
I will reveal some of my selfish ego here and tell you that at one point I would like to write a here's what actually happened on the mountains story. In fact, I'm probably going to make it into a podcast where I'm like interviewing you and interviewing Walt and all the people that I was with. I think that would be more engaging. So I do want to tell that story. And I kind of had that thought in my mind of, okay, that's like reserved for that purpose later. I had done it mentally. I kind of easily got to a place of here's what this book is for. And there's what that story later is going to be for. And so by getting clear about the intent and who the reader was and how I could best serve them, that's what that's why it was not that difficult. But if I can back up a little from what you just mentioned about like people looking on Quora and seeing what's hot right now and like what's going to sell, that's what I did with Climb On. And when I heard, I moved to corporate speaking and they said, oh, do you have a book for us? We don't want to buy this teenage book. I was like, okay, I'll write up this book, The Mini Manual for Becoming Super Awesome. And that's my second book because I was like, I heard the need for it. Those were my self-published books. And that's good. You can go look on Quora. You can go look at the market need and write your self-published book. And that's going to be like a great way for you to cut your chops, get good at the writing process, to learn what goes into writing a book so that when the publisher says, okay, it's going to move to galleys now. I was like, cool, I know what that means. And like, I'd done that before. Every step of the way, okay, here's cover art, interior design, copy editing. I was up to speed with what was going to happen for each of those processes because of the self-publishing part. However, when it comes to content, I would not have been able to create such a quality writing or content, and I wouldn't have been ready to sell it, because if you have a proper publishing house book and you can't sell it and you don't know how you're going to move the thing, that's kind of your last shot unless something like astronomically weird happens. Yet because I figured out here's what works for selling books, now I can go to a publisher, make this thing take off. That's going to allow it to become a success. So this was the flow that worked for me.
Let me tell you something. You just touched on one of the first lessons that you taught me. So I don't know how old you were, maybe 12 when we met in Talkeetna.
I'm 14 now, so that makes sense.
It's like you were like this little cub, right? And we're sitting having hot dogs in Talkeetna, and Walt and I had just come off of Denali, and you were going to go on. And you were talking about an online business, and you were saying, like, I think I had mentioned that I was a writer, and you were like, I write books on like dog training. And what's really interesting is you write a book about training your golden retriever. And then you sell that, and then you take that same book, and then you make training your Jack Russell. And you just keep taking the book and changing the name of the dog and, like maybe altering a few things. And I just sat back and I'm like, I am going about life all wrong. Because it's like, you find the market and then you create the product. And most of us, particularly artists or people who are like, I want to start a business helping women in transition, like, we come at it from what we want to do, what our passion is. And we spend about 12 and a half, actually I'm being generous, 12 nanoseconds analyzing whether there's a market for it.
Yeah.
And so I love that you've always been really good at analyzing a market, determining whether there's a market for it before you sink a ton of time and effort into it. And we're here, we've got egos, right? We've got healthy egos. And it is like, how do you find the balance between telling your story and owning your magnificence and creating something that people actually want, there's a need for, and they will pay money for? And I love how somebody came to you and said, you're our guy, because you're already talking about this. You've already got the audience. You already have the platform for it. You've got a proven track record for creating books. So you wrote a parable. You created a really good, solid parable that holds to.
The first book, right. And if I can sort of expand on this, what you're saying, you mentioned earlier, like you'd seen those speaker reels, right? Every speech I gave for 15 years, I would try and at least film something or get a testimonial from an audience member, or I'd have something tangible that I could take away that was real feedback from an audience, and I could use that in marketing. That turned into a Goalcast video that ended up having like I think it has like 2.6 million views right now. It's not like their top hit video ever. You know, they've got like some that have like 100 million views. It was just kind of like a marginal success, really, according to Goalcast. For me, that's the most anything's ever been viewed that I've done. That video is what was actually played in the meeting for the head honchos in the tower at Random House. They said, do we want this guy to write our book? Let's watch this 6-minute video. So it was a compilation of, look at this video. He's got a voice. Clearly kids listen to him. You know, they can see the audience members sitting there. He's got these 2 other books. He sold X number of books. I think it was like 30,000 for 30 or
That's
35,000 for Climb On.
a lot
Yeah,
of
it's
books.
right. So to be able to prove this, like I have these tracked numbers of here's how many I printed, and I don't own them anymore, but every year I print off like 3,000 to 5,000 copies, and over the years that adds up. And the mini manual for becoming super awesome, I think I'm at like 15,000 now, all mostly selling at my speeches. All of that track record is what led to the Random House bigwig deal.
I love grounding everybody in reality.
Yeah.
Because like we all look on the surface and nobody understands what's behind the curtain. And like, thank you for sharing that. So if like, I want people to buy your book because
So do I.
your book is super well structured. And one of my friends who's also a book developer, she said, you know, how did he choose the missions to send kids on? Like, how did he choose that? How did you choose? Like, how did you choose the missions?
Everywhere I've been, 67 countries now, I have this kind of question I ask when I'm in a moment of realness. And I'm sure I've talked to you and Walt about this before, but what makes a quality human being? What makes a man? What makes a woman in our world today? And I love having this conversation. It's like my geek go-to talk. I found that there were 8 consistent things mentioned in some way or another, some language or another, some phrase or another, that kept popping up. And that's what each of the 8 quests are. So I was like, okay, what are the most important things that mean here's what to step up as a warrior today in today's world? That's what those were. But then I also needed to find, okay, now I have to find crazy awesome stories that kids are going to dig and just eat up in order for them to buy into these lessons. So I started with the morals and then found real life superheroes that matched the morals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was like, a kid's not going to read a self-help book. They're never going to be interested in a self-help book straight through. But they will be interested in a guy who's smearing seal blubber over his naked body so that he can swim across the icy Danube River in March in order to escape a communist country. It's like, wait, what?
As one does.
Yeah. That's our next vacation, right?
I mean, amongst our people, it's like, that's not a bad idea. I wonder if Crisco would work. So
I'm sure it would. They got lots of that in Ireland. Let's swim in the middle of the Atlantic.
So this is why I want people to buy your book. So, and this is who I want to buy your book and why. So I think like my generation, we've got grandkids right now. Like this is where you say, there's just no way you have grandchildren, Anne, because you are amazing. And then I will say, I know, but yeah, like you can't control your children. They will be out there having children. But so if you've got grandkids and if you've got sons, like this is such an important conversation right now, because if we don't teach our sons how to navigate this world, they could be called out and have their life ruined.
Yes.
By doing stuff they don't realize isn't working for them and isn't working for other people. It's like, it's a real, like you think like climbing Denali is obstacle ridden. I think being a boy in the current environment, in these changing, shifting times.
There are statistics that say that young men are seeing pornography as young as 3 to 6 years old. By the age of 18, It's like 98% have seen or used it, and they're getting that as their model of here's how to interact with women. This is what dating in a relationship is. You've got 76% of teen suicides, males, school shooters. Who are they? They're guys with messed up messages in their heads. The ideas of here's what it means to be a guy in the world today are messed up. And those are the extreme cases, yes. But what you said was spot on. Would you rather just get a correct footing and good start for the young man in your life right now, or be playing triage when it's already too late?
So,
Start now.
and I know you, and I know you're like, you conquer mountains, right? You're like the dude, but you're also a really good guy. So if I wanted a young man to have a mentor, you'd be an amazing mentor. Hands
Thank you.
down. You're welcome.
Thank
And
you, man.
it's true. And we won't even talk about, you just need to remember to pack all your gear, the right gear. But we won't even get into that stuff. The other kind of people that I want to purchase your book are people who want to write a book, who want to use their personal story, and who need to understand different ways to use your personal story without it being overwhelming, without it being about you, with with a very clear outcome for the target market readership. Like by the
Yes.
time they finish this book, by the time they walk through these series of steps, this will be the outcome. So the structure of your book, how you show up in the story, how you use your story really creatively, how this is the kind of book that gets picked up by a major publishing house. We're not even going to talk your platform. Your platform had to be there, right? But this is the kind of book that does get picked up. And the stuff that's me, ego, 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 I'm all about ego. I do it all myself too. Those aren't the books that are being purchased right now. It's like
Correct.
they're
So
really slim.
if you're a writer out there and you think you've gone through some tough shit, look at every other human being on the planet right now. We're all dealing with our crap and the pandemic and what the world is like. There are success stories and sob stories galore. So if you're a writer and you want to see a structure of a book that is laid out clearly in a way that a publisher is going to be interested in and a way that's going to work for your audience, get this book just to study that. Like it's laid out in 3 training phases. I said it was like a rite of passage. So training phase 1 is weapons mastery, which is like my code language. Here's how to look after yourself. Training phase 2 is armor upgrades. That's how to look after others and interact with the world in a way that you don't get hurt and you don't hurt others. And then training phase 3 is battleground selection. What is your purpose in the world? How are you going to go after the things in life that truly matter? And also in there is how to avoid toxic relationships. Like this structure, just by seeing the layout of the book, it will be useful to any writer. I promise that. The other thing that will be interesting is to see how I switch tenses, because I switch between second person, putting the reader in the story, and then I, as gracefully as I could humanly write, and the editor could help to make this effect, I switched to now I'm talking directly to you as a reader, as a person, and let's talk about what this actually means. And then go back, and then not get boring here, not pontificating so much on my own thoughts, but then going back into a story. And this balance will be instructive. And I say that because it was instructive to me in how the editor cut my babies. I had 400 pages originally.
No,
And
no.
and she cut it to, the final manuscript was 225. And it was like, you're killing half of my book? But what she did was so much above and beyond anything I would have created or done on my own. And seeing that in the result of this book is going to be instructive to any writer out there.